I didn't weep when my parents told me they weren't coming to my graduation. I didn't shout. I didn't protest. I just stared at the wall and listened as they explained they'd already booked a vacation trip with my sister. That moment should have shattered me. Instead, it explained everything. So, I made a separate call. I asked the people who had shown up for me when no one else did. I didn't share it. I didn't tell anyone. On graduation day, the cameras were live, the auditorium was full, and my parents were watching from a hotel room, thinking they'd made an innocent choice. My name is Luna. I was 22 when this happened, and for most of my life, I was the simple child, the quiet one, the one who didn't need much. That's what my parents used to say whenever someone asked about me. My sister, on the other hand, required everything. At our family table, conversations always tilted in her direction. Her job pressure, her plans, her disappointments. My parents listened to her the way people lean closer when they're worried of missing something important. When I spoke, they nodded politely, eyes already wandering, waiting for me to finish so they could return to what really mattered. Our house looked cozy from the outside. Framed photos on the walls, holiday decorations still up days too long, the smell of coffee in the mornings. But inside there was a silent hierarchy. Everyone knew without saying out loud. My sister was the focus. I circled. When I got into college, the excitement lasted about 5 minutes. Then my mom said, "That's nice, honey," and pivoted to ask my sister about a trip she was planning. I covered my own tuition through scholarships and part-time work. I handled my own bills, my own payments, my own everything. My parents supported my sister with her car, her apartment, anything she needed. When I once asked for help with textbooks, my mom grinned and said, "You're so independent, Luna. You'll figure it out." I learned not to ask again. By the time graduation approached, I already understood how the conversation would go. I still phoned. A part of me needed to hear it directly. My mom didn't even pause. "We already have plans with your sister," she said. My dad mentioned that she was going through a stressful time and needed them more. Neither of them wondered what graduating meant to me. I hung up the phone and sat on my bed, watching at the cap and gown hanging from my closet door. I felt the familiar ache in my chest, but underneath it was something new. Not sadness, not anger, understanding. I realized then that I wasn't waiting to be chosen now. I was done hoping they'd suddenly notice me. And for the first time in my life, I started to imagine what it might look like to choose myself instead. The thing about being overlooked your whole life is that you stop anticipating anything. You tell yourself it doesn't hurt anymore. Even when it does, you learn how to hide disappointment quietly and keep moving. Looking back, the signs were visible everywhere. My parents missed my high school awards ceremony because my sister had a work commitment. When I won a small writing prize my sophomore year of college, my mom said she was proud, then immediately wondered if I could help my sister move that weekend. Every milestone in my life felt like background static to something louder, something more urgent, something that wasn't me. I worked part-time all through school, late nights, early mornings. I learned how to stretch a paycheck and decide which bills could wait a few days. Meanwhile, my sister talked casually about payments my parents paid for her, as if it was just how the world worked. When she teased me about my little writing projects, my parents chuckled along. Not maliciously, just naturally, like they didn't see a reason to stop her. By the time graduation came around, I wasn't shocked. They chose a getaway trip over me. But that didn't make it sting less. It just made it routine. A few days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table in my closest friend's house, helping her mom fold laundry. It was one of those simple afternoons that feel warmer than they should. The radio hummed gently. The windows were ajar. Her dad passed by and asked how graduation planning was going. I paused before answering. Then I told them the story. There was a silence. Not the awkward kind I was used to, but the weighty kind. Her mom set the towels down carefully. Her dad shook his head like he couldn't fully believe what he'd heard. "That's not fair," her mom said. "This is a huge day." They didn't try to repair it. They didn't give advice. They simply listened, and then her mom smiled at me. The kind of smile that makes your chest tighten a little. "Well," she said softly, "we'd love to be there if you want us." The words took me off guard. I hadn't intended on saying yes. I hadn't planned on anything, but in that moment, something changed. I realized I had been treating my parents' absence as a rule I had to follow instead of a choice I could respond to. So, I answered yes. That night, I sat alone in my room and looked at my phone. I thought about calling my parents to tell them, to explain, to ease it somehow. But then I realized I didn't owe anybody an explanation for choosing people who showed up. For the first time, I wasn't responding. I was choosing. And once that door unlocked in my mind, I couldn't close it again. Once I said yes, everything became oddly quiet. Not serene exactly, more like the calm that comes before something irreversible. There was no major fallout. My parents didn't unexpectedly call to change their plans. My sister didn't sense anything at all. Life continued the way it always had, with me on the edges and them at the center. And for the first time, I quit fighting that reality. What my family didn't know was that my life had been moving in a separate direction for a long time. I'd been working quietly while I was in school, writing late at night, revising scripts between classes, taking feedback, getting better, learning how to survive rejection without letting it empty me out. I never talked about it at home because no one inquired. And eventually, I learned not to offer information that would be ignored. A few weeks before graduation, my manager pulled me aside after a lengthy meeting. We were standing in a hallway that smelled faintly like burnt coffee and printer ink. He told me the project I'd been working on had moved forward in a larger way than expected. There would be public acknowledgement. He asked if I'd be comfortable with that happening at graduation in front of my campus. I remember blinking at him, unexpectedly caught off guard. Then I thought about the empty seats that were supposed to be saved for my parents. "Yes," I said. "That's okay." I didn't tell my family, not because I wanted to hide it, but because it didn't occur to me to share good news with people who had never made space for it before. I filled out the forms the school provided. For the section labeled family guests, I listed the names of the people who had asked me how I was doing without being asked. As graduation day got closer, I expected to feel anxious. Instead, I felt grounded. I pressed my cap, laid out my gown, and folded it neatly over the back of my chair. When my mom texted me a photo of the resort's view, I stared at it for a moment before setting my phone face down. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different, lighter, more steady. I realized something then that I wish I'd understood earlier. Losing people who never really showed up isn't a loss. It's a freedom. And as I turned off the light and crawled into bed, I knew that the next day wouldn't just be about finishing school. It would be about who got to stand with me when everything I'd built finally became seen. Graduation day arrived without drama, no last-minute calls, no sudden change of heart. The morning light slipped through the curtains, soft and unbothered, like the world wasn't holding its breath the way I felt. I got dressed slowly. The fabric of the gown felt weightier than I expected, the sleeves brushing against my wrists as I adjusted it. My cap sat crooked at first, and I smiled quietly to myself as I fixed it in the mirror. I didn't see a girl waiting to be noticed anymore. I saw someone who had finished something difficult. When we arrived at the auditorium, the air hummed with noise. Families filled the rows, hugging, laughing, taking photos that would end up framed or forgotten in boxes. I scanned the crowd out of habit, even though I already knew where my parents would not be seated. Then I saw them. My best friend's parents were waving from the family section, her mom already holding a tissue. Her dad beaming like this was his own child's moment. Something warm settled in my chest. Not sadness, not longing, thankfulness. As we lined up backstage, the lights dimmed and the music rose. Names were called. One by one, students crossed the stage. When it was my turn, I stepped forward, heart steady, hands loose. I shook the dean's hand and accepted my diploma, smiling into the cheers. It was loud, genuine, and for the first time, it felt like it was meant for me. I thought that would be the highlight of the day. I was wrong. After the last name was called, the dean returned to the microphone. He paused, glancing toward the wings of the stage, then back at the crowd. Before we conclude, he said, we have a special acknowledgement from one of our industry partners. A ripple moved through the room. I felt my pulse race, but I kept my face neutral, eyes fixed ahead. A woman stepped onto the stage, confident, poised. I recognized her immediately. She had been part of my professional life for years, long before my family ever bothered to ask what I was doing with my time. She took the microphone and spoke clearly, calmly, the kind of voice that draws attention without asking for it. One of your fellow graduates has contributed to a project that surpassed every expectation we had, she said. Her work became the foundation of a large production currently moving forward. The room went silent. I could sense people shifting in their seats. She spoke my name. I stood, legs somewhat unsteady now, and walked back onto the stage. The lights were brighter up close, hot against my skin. I took the folder. She passed me, my fingers tightening just enough to remind myself to breathe. She spoke about the project in careful, rounded numbers, a substantial budget, a long-term opportunity, a commitment that would change my life. I didn't search for my parents. I didn't have to. Then she said this. We would also like to recognize the parents who supported her throughout this journey. Time stretched. I heard several murmurs ripple through the audience. She turned not toward the vacant seats my parents would have occupied, but toward the section where my best friend's parents were sitting. Would you kindly join us on stage? For a brief second, they didn't move. Her mom looked around confused, her hand floating near her chest. Her dad bent in, whispering something I couldn't hear. I caught their eyes and nodded. They rose. The walk up the aisle felt lengthier than my own walk across the stage. The audience looked curious, uncertain. When they reached us, her mom was already crying, not quietly, openly, the kind of crying that comes from being overcome by something you never expected to be part of. The woman gave them an envelope and a framed certificate. She explained it plainly. A gratitude gift. A thank you for trusting, for showing up, for being present. The amount was said once clearly without fanfare. The room reacted immediately. Gasps, applause, people rising. Her mom covered her lips. Her dad wrapped an arm around her shoulders, eyes bright. I stood there letting it happen, letting the truth exist in the public. The cameras caught everything. The expressions, the uncertainty turning into understanding, the pride that had nothing to do with blood. Hundreds of miles away, my parents were watching from a hotel room. I know this because later when I checked my phone, the evidence was there. But in that moment, I didn't think about them once. I thought about every night I'd spent working alone, every bill I'd paid myself, every time I'd swallowed a story because no one wanted to hear it, and I felt something click into place. This was what showing up meant. When the ceremony ended, the crowd spilled out into the afternoon light. My best friend's parents hugged me tightly over and over like they were afraid letting go would make it fade. We're so proud of you, her mom kept saying. We're so very proud. I smiled, nodded, thanked people as they congratulated me. I took pictures. I laughed. I exhaled. Then my phone started buzzing. At first, I ignored it. I didn't need to look to know who it was, but it kept going. Buzz after buzz after buzz. When I finally pulled it out of my pocket, the screen was almost completely filled with alerts. Missed calls, messages, more missed calls. 78 of them. Texts layered on top of each other. Some frantic, some angry, some desperate. My mom's name over and over. My dad's number. My sister suddenly panicked. I didn't open a single message. I turned the phone face down and slid it back into my pocket. We went to dinner afterward, the four of us, at a small place not far from campus. Nothing fancy, just warm food, clinking glasses, and the low murmur of conversation. Her dad insisted on making a toast. Her mom kept reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. At one point, my phone buzzed again, and her mom glanced at it softly. "You don't have to answer that," she said. "I know," I replied, and I meant it. The story spread faster than I expected. Clips from the ceremony appeared online. Local coverage picked it up. People shared it, commented, argued, cheered. Some called it cruel. Others called it justice. I didn't respond to any of it. Why parents tried everything. They called shared friends. They left messages with distant family. My sister posted a public message about how proud she was, how she'd always believed in me. It didn't hit the way she hoped. People remembered details. Screenshots resurfaced. Old comments, old jokes at my expense. The calls didn't stop. Neither did my quiet. A few days later, my parents reached out through a third party asking for a talk. They said there had been a misunderstanding, that they deserved to be recognized, that they were my parents. I listened as the message was passed to me. Then I thanked the person and went back to my work, because here was the truth they didn't want to face. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because they missed the moment. And that door had already shut. In the days that followed, my life didn't implode. It settled. I went back to work. Meetings, revisions, long hours that felt different now, not heavier, lighter. The kind of tired that comes from building something real. My best friend's parents checked in on me every morning, not to ask for updates, just to ask how I was doing. Sometimes I didn't know how to answer, so I said, "Okay." And that was enough. My parents kept trying through relatives, through old family friends. They wanted to explain, to be seen, to reclaim something they thought was theirs. I never responded. Silence wasn't punishment. It was a boundary. Eventually, the calls slowed. The messages ended. Life moved on the way it always does when you stop feeding the chaos. What surprised me most wasn't how calm I felt. It was how little guilt remained. I had spent years believing that love meant endurance. That family meant tolerance. Now I understood something simpler. Love shows up. Family stays. And once you learn that difference, you don't unlearn it. Today, when people ask me about my family, I don't hesitate anymore. I talk about the ones who showed up, the ones who sat in the front row, the ones who chose me without conditions. Blood didn't make them my family. Presence did. If you've ever been overlooked by the people who were supposed to stand beside you, know this. You're not wrong for choosing yourself. You're not cold for closing a door that kept you small. If this story felt familiar, share it in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story.